Hello and welcome and thanks for tuning in. You're watching Gravitas. My name is Priyanka Sharma. Here's our lineup for tonight.
Palu kepemimpinan saya serahkan kepada India.
Today, India took over the presidency of the G20. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi laid out the agenda. He said India's presidency will be inclusive, it will be ambitious, decisive and action-oriented. The focus would be on unity and counter-terrorism and tackling global challenges. In fact, stay with us on the show today. We have a big exclusive coming up. WION spoke exclusively to India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. We'll bring you the full interview on the show today. Now, the G20 is a grouping of the world's major developed and developing economies. It includes China too. Right before India took over the presidency, a Chinese mouthpiece decided to preach diplomacy. An op-ed said that India should have a more positive attitude towards other G20 members, including China. How rich of a country like China to preach positivity while continuing to be aggressive towards its neighbors in South China Sea? So on Gravitas tonight, we will focus on India's G20 presidency and we will tell you why it is a golden opportunity. Also on the show, a man was reportedly killed by security forces in Iran as anti-government protesters celebrated the national team's loss against the US. Where is the outrage from the West? On the show, we expose the politics of convenience. Many awkward questions are being asked of the royal family after a social media post reported the persistent questioning of a black British charity boss. Allegations of racism are flying thick and fast. But are we surprised? We'll explore the royal family's history. And a new survey says that while the number of women in leadership roles is rising, trust in them is failing. We'll tell you why these findings expose the prejudice in society. Also coming up is our big exclusive interview with India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar. Stay with us. Can India use the G20 presidency to turn the tables on China? Beijing sent a word of advice to New Delhi earlier today as India formally took over as G20 president. The advice came in the form of a preachy Global Times editorial. G20 should be an opportunity for China-India engagement, it said. Do you sense the condescending tone here? We thought India had made its terms of engagement crystal clear. First, resolve the standoff in Ladakh. Restore status quo and then we can talk. China has not done much on that front. There have been 25 rounds of WMCC talks. It stands for Working Mechanism for Consultation and Coordination on the India-China Border Affairs. There have also been 16 rounds of Corps Commander level talks and 16 rounds of Senior Military Commander level talks. But peace evades. And here you have China lecturing India through its mouthpiece, telling New Delhi how it should conduct itself as the president of the G20 and use the position to work together with China. But here's a thought. What if India instead leveraged its position to hold China accountable? Be it for wreaking havoc on the global economy by failing to handle the outbreak, or for choking the global supply chains by refusing to open up, or for becoming a security threat to the region. Allow me to repeat my question. Can India use its G20 presidency to turn the tables on China? G20 comprises 19 countries and a regional organization. We are talking about Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, the Republic of Korea, which is South Korea, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Turkey, the UK, the United States and the European Union. Together, the G20 represents 65% of the world's population, 79% of global trade and at least 85% of the world economy. What if a group so powerful begins putting tough questions to China? India is the group's president and it is in a position to turn the tables on China. How can it do so? China says G20 is not an appropriate forum to discuss China-India border dispute. That's a quote from the Global Times op-ed. We understand G20 is not Quad, but here's the thing. Today, politics and security are intertwined with economy. The world knows this and the world acknowledges this. I'll give you a recent example. Ukraine was not part of the formal agenda in Bali, but Western countries spared no opportunity to seize the forum to criticize Russia or to discuss Ukraine. The war was repeatedly mentioned, sometime with reference to the economic downturn, sometime supply chain disruption. Now guess what? No country has disrupted the global chain in the last few years as much as China has. What if India repeatedly highlights this and does what the West did in Bali? What if India highlights how China has been weaponizing the supply chain, trying to profit from the pandemic? The G20 is bound to act, come up with policies necessitating an alternate supply chain. In the G20 summit held in 2011 in France, members agreed that the group has a responsibility to quote-unquote coordinate their policies and produce political agreements that are very important in addressing the challenges due to conditions of global economic interdependence. Let me be clear, China is that challenge today. Businesses worldwide are suffering because China first failed to handle an outbreak and then refused to live with the virus. Many companies which have factories in China have not been able to open up. They have been forced to shut shop or suffer losses. And this issue falls perfectly in line with India's list of priorities. There are 5 issues in total. 1. Growth and prosperity. 2. Resilient global value chains. 3. MSMEs. 4. Logistics. And 5. WTO reform or the World Trade Organization reform. If you leave the 5th one out, you'd see that China has been detrimental to all of the rest. The presidency also gives India a chance to position itself as the alternative to China. India has the resources. It has skilled labor. What's more, it is projected to grow faster than G7 countries. India can leverage its position to ask global companies to make in India instead of China. We will discuss this in detail in the coming days. You see, in the months leading up to the 18th G20 summit in New Delhi in September, there will be at least 200 G20 meetings. Ministers will be meeting, so will senior officials of G20, and all of them will be held in India and chaired by India. It's a fantastic opportunity for diplomatic outreach, for India to table its interest and seek consensus. We understand that the G20 is a grouping of multiple great powers and each of which have multiple interests. But this is India's chance to position itself as one of the leading powers. But for that to happen, India must take hard decisions. It must boldly talk about its interests and make it known to the world. It must also ensure that member states find a consensus on these issues. I'll give you another example from Bali. For months leading up to the summit, the Western powers lobbied to keep Russia out of the event. And guess what? Eventually, Vladimir Putin did not have a seat in Bali. See what I'm talking about? What's stopping India from following suit? We are not saying stop Xi Jinping from flying down to India later next year. Or don't give a forum to Chinese Sherpas. My point is simple. Just like the West raised security concerns in Bali, ensured that Russia remains a talking issue, India too can do the same and turn the tables on China. And why shouldn't it? Beijing, after all, is the biggest security threat to this neighborhood. It has engaged India in a standoff, warned the US against interfering. China is flexing its muscles in the South China Sea, amping up nuclear warheads and threatening Taiwan. You see, India believes in multilateralism, and China stands for everything antithetic to that. It is synonymous with unilateral coercion. Raising issues relevant to this region will only give India the chance to become the voice of the global south, which again is a position that China has been eyeing. India says its conduct as president of G20 will be inclusive, ambitious, decisive. The theme New Delhi has chosen is Vasudev Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. The dragon is a threat to this very future, and India has the opportunity to tame it. Now, earlier this evening, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar spoke exclusively to WION World as One. He said that India's endeavour at the G20 will be to push for food security. Listen in.
A very important day for India as it takes over the G20 presidency. What would India's immediate priorities be, and what would your message be to the Russian and the Ukrainian leadership at this point?
You know, I agree with you, a very important day. In fact, we've had a number of events today to underline that, beginning with the Prime Minister's op-ed, which was carried by multiple newspapers across the world. And, you know, our endeavor obviously would be to address some of the pressing issues of the day, issues like food security, energy security, more perennial issues like sustainable development goals, climate action, climate justice. But we have just taken over the presidency. I think there will also be a lot of consultations with other countries because we are very determined that India should really articulate the concerns and the interests of the global south. The global south is under a lot of pressure due to a combination of circumstances, debt, COVID, the Ukraine conflict, extreme climate, in some parts of the world, terrorism as well. You know, some of what we would be pushing is visible right now. Some of it, I think, would emerge with the passage of time. But definitely, you know, we intend to have both a very consultative but also a very impactful presidency.
Indeed, and what is also visible is India's unique position on the global stage. How do you think it can see India emerge as a key mediator between Russia and Ukraine, and the potential that India has on that front?
You know, there's no question the world is very polarized. And one of the crucial issues of polarization right now is the Ukraine conflict. Our effort, I mean, where Ukraine itself is concerned, you know, we've been from the very start advocates of diplomacy and dialogue, and the Prime Minister has been very clear that this is not an era of war. But even going into Bali, the Bali was the Indonesian presidency. The Indonesians had a very tough task on their hands. I think they did extremely well under the circumstances, but we were very supportive of them, and we essentially, a number of us worked together to find some kind of common landing point on the more difficult issues, so that the G20 itself was not in some way jeopardized by this polarization. I think today countries do recognize the value of someone like India, which has maintained its relationship, which has made clear its principles, at the same time which has applied itself really to nudging developments towards away from the conflict. And you know, the conflict today has other individual aspects of it. The grain initiative, grain export initiative was one of them. There was some anxiety on some of the nuclear issues. There are other concerns. I mean, even I think fertilizer, how do you get fertilizer out to the world is a big concern right now. We are working, you know, sometimes on our own, sometimes visibly, sometimes less so, sometimes supportively, We've been very, very much in contact with the UN Secretary General on a lot of his efforts. So there's a lot happening out there, but our effort would be to see if the G20 as the premier forum of the biggest economies of the world focus on the right issues, focus on the vulnerabilities and the anxieties of the global south, because if we take our eyes off that ball, I think the world's really headed for trouble.
That, of course, was our big exclusive. We'll get you more excerpts from that interview through the day. For now, let's shift focus and tell you what's happening in Iran. On Wednesday, we told you how Iranians were celebrating their loss, their team's defeat in the FIFA World Cup. They danced on the streets, cheered for the Americans, even waved the American flag, all in a bid to embarrass their regime. Guess how the regime has responded? It has shot and killed a man who celebrated the loss. At least that's what an Oslo-based Iran human rights group says. It says that Iranian security forces killed a 27-year-old man for honking his car's horn. Yes, that's how trivial his supposed crime was. So who exactly was this man? Reports say his name was Mehran Samak. On your screen is a video of him partying with his friends. Reports say following Iran's defeat against America in the World Cup, Samak, like many other Iranians, took to the streets to celebrate. His only crime was not lying low. He got noticed by security forces who shot him in the head and killed him. The incident unfolded in Bandar Anzali, a city on the Caspian Sea coast northwest of Tehran. The killing has sparked national outrage. Iranians from all walks of life are protesting his death. Artists, actors, musicians, they're all condemning the gruesome killing and calling upon the world to hold the Iranian regime accountable. That's not all. Even a member of Iran's football team, midfielder Saeed Ezzatullahi, has spoken about the killing. He says the victim was his childhood friend and that he hasn't slept ever since he learned about his death. On your screen now is a picture that the football player posted. It shows both him and Samak dressed in football gear as children. The caption reads in Farsi, "I wish we could always remain that age without concern, without hate, without jealousy, without fighting to destroy each other. This is not what our youth deserves. This is not what our nation deserves. Be sure that someday, when the masks fall and the truth appears, they'll pay for your family's mournful hearts and your mother's grief." It truly is a heart-wrenching statement and an apt description of the state of affairs in Iran, where a man is killed for honking his car's horn, where journalists are arrested for questioning the regime and women are beaten for not abiding by the regime's dress code. Just where will this cycle end? What will it take for the world to hold Iran accountable? Why are world leaders and global bodies silent on this? It's about time we ask these questions. It's been over 3 months since these protests started. 3 months of torture, atrocities, and human rights violations. 3 months of unwarranted killings, imprisonments, disappearances. Yet, much of the Western world has largely remained silent. Take the case of the United States, a country that likes to play the global cop, a country that likes to name and shame human rights violators. Since February this year, it has unleashed a string of invectives against Russia, slammed Moscow for its alleged human rights violations in Ukraine. How many statements has the US president issued on Iran? Forget the president. How many Western activists have spoken on this? Last we checked, there weren't many in number. Even those who have appeared to have done so at the behest of the Iranian diaspora living in their countries. So they might have spoken at protest rallies organized by some Iranian diaspora, but my point is simple. Iran is aflame with fury against its regime. Courageous women are refusing to bend before gender rules. They're joined by Iranian men who risk losing their lives. Imagine if this had unfolded in any Western country, a Ukraine, a Poland, or a Norway. The same Western world would have gone all guns blazing against the leaders of those countries. Yet, for all their talk of fighting draconian regimes, the US and Europe seem shy about getting tough on Iran. What explains this? Is it because they think condemning Iran would further stall the 2015 nuclear deal? Or is it because they think condemning Iran would further make the theocracy support Russia? The answer seems to be a mix of both. You see, Biden has made a habit of reacting only on threats to his own electoral prospects. Like the nuclear deal falling flat, Saudi Arabia shutting the gas tap, or Iran entering a prospective alliance with Russia. These are issues that drive him to make public comments, people risking lives to defend democracy, people getting killed for demanding their rights. These issues seem to have affected the world, but they seem to leave him indifferent. I don't say this without reason. Look at history. Back in 2009, when Iran witnessed similar protests, when US President Barack Obama had refused to support the movement, a decision he later called a mistake. 13 years on, Iran is once again on the boil, and the US President is once again silent. Yes, he may have expressed his concern. He may have spoken about human dignity, but that's it. We ask, isn't this politics of convenience? It's a question America and its allies, who like to act as the torch bearers of human rights, ought to answer. If someone said to you that the British royal family is racist, it may come across as a sweeping statement. But the royal family's actions, its history, have put it in a rather awkward spot. I will start with the most recent incident that's dominating the Wales' US visit. Something happened at a recent event hosted by the Buckingham Palace. A founder of a charity was asked, "Where is she from?" Seems like an innocent question. There's nothing wrong with it if you look at the context of the incident. But here, during this event, only this particular charity founder was asked where she was really from. The reason? She was a woman of color. Her name is Ngozi Fulani. She was invited to the event by the palace. But a lady in waiting saw nothing wrong in walking up to Fulani and moving her hair to inspect her name badge. What followed was a long line of questions that were usually and totally uncalled for. Fulani's charity has posted a transcript of this conversation. Take a look. She was asked, "Where are you from?" "Sister space," she said. "No, where do you come from?" "We are based in Hackney," Fulani replies. Next question, "No, which part of Africa are you from?" "I don't know, they didn't leave any record." The lady in waiting was not convinced. She went on to quiz the charity founder on her nationality, where her people come from. Fulani replies she was born in Britain, but the palace representative finds it really hard to believe. At one point she says, "Oh, I can see I'm going to have a challenge getting you to say where you're from." Fulani is forced to repeat herself, "Lady, I'm a British national, my parents came here in the 50s, and guess what she is told? "Oh, I knew we'd get there in the end, you're Caribbean." Wouldn't you call this harassment? Imagine being sidelined, quizzed, and made to feel like an outsider at an event that you have been invited for the work that you've done. Fulani has fought for survivors of domestic abuse. And a white lady in the British palace thinks it's okay to belittle a prominent black advocate because of her skin color. This lady in waiting's name is Susan Hussey. She happens to be the godmother of Prince William. Also one of the incoming Queen's companions. By incoming Queen, we mean Queen Consort Camilla. Now this woman has apologized, also resigned from her post. But that does not solve or even begin to address the real problem. You see, this was not the first incident of racism that the palace has been accused of. It is also unlikely to be the last. The British royals have a checkered history with race. Some of you may have watched Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's interview with Oprah. Harry had said that racism was one of the major reasons why he and Meghan left the UK. The couple said that members of the royal family had raised concerns over how dark Harry and Meghan's child's skin color would be. And this was before their son Archie was even born. So even if you factor the couple's uncomfortable history with the royals in and the personal agenda that may have driven the flow of this conversation, can you really absolve the palace of racism, of speculating or critiquing an unborn child's skin color? Prince William had reacted to that interview. He had said, "We are not a racist family." Why and what then explains the conduct of his godmother? Prince William's office has reacted to this incident. This time it's a little preachy. Racism has no place in society. Well, we are guessing the royal family is an exception then, because the palace had gone to the extent of closing its doors to people of color. Did you know the Buckingham Palace was not hiring people of certain races until the 1960s? Look at this headline. The palace banned ethnic minorities from office roles. Colored migrants were banned from serving in clerical roles in the royal household. People of color were only allowed to work as domestic servants. The doors were opened for them only in the late 1960s. Sometime before that, laws were passed in Britain, making it illegal to deny employment on the grounds of race. But you know what? The Queen was exempted from the equality laws, which also made it impossible for the domestic servants to complain to the courts if they were discriminated against. And if you think we are digging too deep in history, let's then cut to 2020. There was a global Black Lives Matter movement. The who's who came out in support of it. But the British royal family remained silent. Meghan and Harry spoke about it, but those in direct line to the throne never did. And it's not really surprising, because the Crown is in no position to take a moral high ground. It has been an integral part of the British slave trade. This was during the 1500s, during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. The monarchy had even gone to the extent of publicly celebrating Captain John Hawkins, the man who captured some 300 Africans and exchanged them for ginger and sugar. He was the first known Englishman to include enslaved Africans in his cargo, and Queen Elizabeth had approved of his journey. When he sailed again in 1564 with the aim to capture more slaves, the Crown contributed a vessel. Have you heard the story of Abdul Karim? He was an attendant of Queen Victoria. He was Indian. In 2017, The Guardian wrote a piece claiming that the royal household, quote-unquote, tried everything to displace him. Why? Because of the color of his skin. And they succeeded. Abdul was abruptly sent back to India after the Queen's death. All of this. And Prince William wants the world to believe that the British royals are not racist. The world knows better. It remembers episodes where the royals were reeking of racism. I don't know how many of you read about Prince Philip's comments on Ethiopian art. He once compared it to, quote-unquote, the kind of thing my daughter would bring back from school art lessons. This was back in 1965. In 1986, Prince Philip was in China. He told a British student that if he stayed much longer, then he would go home with, quote-unquote, slitty eyes. In 1999, Prince Philip visited an electronics factory in Scotland. He looked at a messy fuse box and said it was as though it was put in by an Indian. This is a case of just one royal. We would be sitting for another hour if I started listing out every instance of racism associated with the royals. So wouldn't it be just better if the family came to terms with the reality and apologized for racism, past and present, and changed its approach to race? Because it's high time they did so. And now let's turn our attention to the United States. Hakeem Jeffries is the new leader of the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives. Why is he making news? Because he's the first African American to lead a party in the House. He will take over from Nancy Pelosi on January 3rd next year. Pelosi was a trailblazer herself, being the first woman to lead a party in Congress. Our next report takes a closer look at her successor.
Hakeem Jeffries is the first African-American leader of the Democratic Party. He was elected unanimously by Democrats on Wednesday.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to stand before you today. as the incoming House Democratic leader for the 118th Congress that will convene on January 3rd, and to be joined by my two good friends, amazing colleagues and partners, the incoming House Democratic Whip, Catherine Clark, and the incoming caucus chair, Pete Aguilar.
The three incoming Democratic leaders are breaking new ground. The top three party leaders will be people of color and a woman. They are also a new generation of Democrats, replacing three octogenarians. They will try and win back control of the House during the 2024 U.S. elections. Jeffries becoming the Democrat leader was expected. He has enjoyed outgoing House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's confidence for years. She has trusted him with important roles during his House tenure. He became chairman of the Democratic Caucus in 2019, making him the youngest member in a leadership role. He has served on the House Judiciary Committee and Budget Committee. Jeffries was also an impeachment manager during former President Donald Trump's 2020 impeachment trial. This means he was responsible for presenting arguments about why Trump needed to be impeached to the Senate. Much like a prosecution lawyer during a trial, his background as a lawyer would have helped. But his appointment also reflected Pelosi's faith in him. And he is clearly grateful for her mentorship. Jeffries paid tribute to her after he was elected.
I also want to convey my thanks to Speaker Nancy Pelosi, an extraordinary speaker for the ages, who has delivered so much for so many over such a significant period of time. Our caucus is better, our country is better, the world is better because of Speaker Nancy Pelosi's incredible leadership.
So, who is Hakeem Jeffries? Well, he is a New Yorker. The 52-year-old lives in and represents Brooklyn. He has been a member of the House since 2013. Before that, he served as a member of the New York State Assembly from 2007. Jeffries calls himself a progressive, but he isn't considered a leftist leader in the Democratic Party. Last year, he distanced himself from Democrats considered far left. He said in an interview with The Atlantic, "There will never be a moment where I bend the knee to hard left democratic socialism." In 2016, he had campaigned for Hillary Clinton in her primary against Senator Bernie Sanders. Sanders is a self-described democratic socialist. And what are Jeffries' thoughts about the far right? Well, this is what he said on Wednesday.
We look forward to finding opportunities to partner with the other side of the aisle and work with them whenever possible. But we will also push back against extremism whenever necessary.
Jeffries is considered a centrist who can find common cause with Republicans. Well, the moderate ones, who haven't denounced the 2020 election results, at least. He will take over as House Minority Leader. This is because the Republicans won control of the House during the midterms. His primary job will be fighting against Republican investigations into Joe and Hunter Biden's activities and laying the groundwork for 2024.
Our next story is about a scandal like no other. It concerns Cyril Ramaphosa, a man who needs no introduction, but I'll still give you one. Because this story is hard to digest. Cyril Ramaphosa is the president of South Africa, a leader who's often dubbed as the buffalo. Why? Because he made a fortune by selling buffaloes. Apparently, he once bid more than 20 million rand on a buffalo. That's not all. Ramaphosa also has a liking for buffaloes. He keeps scores of them at his farm, imports them from nearby nations, invests in breeding and nurturing them, even writes books about their history. Why am I telling you this? Because Ramaphosa is embroiled in Farmgate. And he's using buffaloes to escape the charges. I know it sounds bizarre because it really is. Let me explain. The story begins in February 2020. This is when a theft unfolded at Ramaphosa's farm. The Fala Fala farm near Bela Bela town. I'm not making these names up. In any case, there was a theft at the farm. An estimated 60 million rand was stolen. That's around $4 million, give or take. Who was behind this theft? No one knows, not even the president himself. And this is where the story gets interesting. Here's why. You see, instead of reporting the theft, instead of informing the police, Ramaphosa dispatched his officials to track down the missing money. The officials followed their trail, traveled to various parts of the country and finally found the alleged thieves, but did not take them to the police again. Why? This question is now the subject of an ongoing investigation. The probe started in June. It was initiated by this man, Arthur Fraser, the former head of South Africa's spy agency and a close ally of former President Jacob Zuma. He lodged a criminal complaint against Ramaphosa, alleged that Ramaphosa himself was behind the theft. How exactly? The former spy boss mentioned 3 reasons. 1. The money stolen was stashed inside a sofa at Ramaphosa's home. 2. The cash was allegedly in foreign currency, not the South African rand. And 3. The fact that Ramaphosa did not even report the theft to authorities. There are so many unknowns about this story that investigators doubt if it ever took place. They are of the opinion that this wasn't a theft but a well-planned money laundering operation, orchestrated by President Ramaphosa himself. They say the president deliberately didn't report the crime because the money stolen was apparently corruption proceeds. What does Ramaphosa have to say about all this? A lot. To start with, he says the money was stolen. That the money stolen was made by selling buffaloes. 2, he says the money wasn't hidden beneath a couch but was kept under sofa cushions for safekeeping. 3, he says he didn't hunt for the perpetrators or file a police complaint over the theft because he didn't want to cause alarm, especially within the nearby farming community. Fair enough, but this still doesn't answer some questions. Questions like, why would anybody keep $4 million beneath sofa cushions? And why was the amount in dollars, not rand? Also, did the president not have a CCTV installed at his farmhouse? If yes, why couldn't he identify the suspects? And if the money was actually earned by selling buffaloes, where is the record or a receipt of the sale? And lastly, which buffaloes in the world are worth $4 million? These are all questions investigators are now probing, more like trying to. Because this case is stranger than fiction, more so because it involves the country's president, a man whose political image and rise to presidency was built on fighting crime and corruption. This puts Ramaphosa's moral standing in question. Even if he didn't order the theft, the nature of the theft itself is murky enough to raise suspicion. Which is why Ramaphosa could get impeached. Yes, a special panel has been set up to hear the case. It's going to decide whether Ramaphosa should face impeachment proceedings next week. Listen to this.
Dragging the president before an impeachment process is a huge decision. It cannot be done on flimsy grounds. There has to be something tangible that you can hold on to before you take that decision.
When we announced that today we'll be receiving this report from the panel, independent panel, we then also announced that on the 6th, by the way, even there was consultation with all political parties, and it was agreed to that on the 6th, which is next week, Tuesday, this report will be tabled before the Assembly.
So by next week, we shall find out if Ramaphosa will be impeached. The question is, does he think he will be? He was recently asked about this in an interview, and here's what he said.
How are you feeling ahead of that debate? And are you concerned that this matter may lead to your premature removal from office?
No.
Because of the citizens?
No, I think I've put my case forward. And of course, let us leave it to that panel to come up with the outcome. And we cannot prejudge it. I can't, you can't, and we leave it in the hands of the panel.
Ramaphosa might be playing down the risk of impeachment, but the evidence against him tells a different story. Foreign currency, hidden under a sofa, stolen under mysterious circumstances by people that the victim doesn't want to bring to task. It'll be hard for anyone to wrap their head around this. Now, before we end the show, I want to talk about a new survey, which should be of concern to all of us, especially women. Research shows that even as more women take up high-ranking positions or roles of leadership, trust in women leaders is falling. For some of us who aim to break through that glass ceiling, it's quite disappointing. But are you surprised? Over the next few minutes, I'll tell you why surveys like these, findings like these, only mirror the prejudice in society. They reflect our bias against women in power. Let's first talk about the survey in detail. The data was published in the Reykjavik Index for Leadership. This is an annual survey which compares how men and women are viewed in positions of power. And it clearly shows that trust in women leaders has fallen steadily throughout the year. Here are some more details. People were interviewed across G7 nations like Canada, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom and the United States. Less than half of respondents, some 47%, said that they were comfortable with a woman as a boss. But 1 in 10 respondents said they would explicitly not be comfortable with a female boss. And no surprises here, men were more likely than women to be critical of a female leader. So what happened? How did trust in women leaders decline in all but 1 year? One word, pandemic. Just think about the last 2 years and their impact on women and their professional lives. They say it takes a village to raise a kid. When the lockdowns were imposed, that village all but vanished. Support systems crumbled, daycare and schools were shut. Women had to juggle professional and personal demands, and in most cases, they became the sole caregivers for children and the elderly at home. Their work suffered as they were constantly interrupted. And naturally, their incomes took a hit. The pandemic exposed the inequality of motherhood globally. In fact, a European Institute for Gender Equality report shows that European women's work-life balance worsened since the start of the pandemic. Many women quit the workforce altogether and never look back. And then you wonder, why the trust deficit? Can they be blamed for it? Certainly not. But the pandemic is only part of the problem. The challenges faced by women at the workplace or in leadership roles go beyond a certain time frame. Patriarchal stereotypes continue to influence hiring decisions. There's institutional misogyny, and this exists globally. Women taking up roles in power corridors. This goes against the traditional status quo. Why trust the unknown, right? We often say workplace and public spaces are male-dominated. That's because they were traditionally created for men. So when women take charge in these roles, they are seen as dominating, aggressive, emotional. Which brings me to another important point. Gender plays a huge role to describe leaders. Just think about the language used. Men are analytical. Women are compassionate. Men may be arrogant, but women are simply inept. I'm not exaggerating. We also need to review how we perceive women in power. We all saw what happened when the Prime Ministers of Finland and New Zealand met. Let me remind you. Take a look.
Yeah, a lot of people will be wondering, are you two meeting just because, you're similar in age and, got a lot of, common stuff there, when you got into politics and stuff? Or can Kiwis actually expect to see more deals between our two countries down the line? Because
my first question is, I wonder whether or not anyone ever asked Barack Obama and John Key if they met because they were of similar age. We, of course, have a higher proportion of men in politics. It's reality. Because two women meet, it's not simply because of the agenda.
We are meeting because we are prime ministers.
You heard that. Two prime ministers, decision makers, both have made news for their policies and governance. But no, the reporter was more curious about their age. And yes, we are sure the same question would not be asked to Barack Obama or John Keyes. Therein lies the prejudice. Recent global events have given us a glimpse into mindsets. Are we progressing or regressing? Look at what's happening in America. The Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe versus Wade has sparked a global debate. If women can't be allowed to take control over their own bodies, how can they be trusted to lead? Think about that. Let's talk about another fact that this survey throws up. In certain countries, including Japan and Germany, young people seem to hold less progressive views than older generations. So experts say they might not trust women leaders. Disappointing. So what can you do? If you're a woman watching me, I wouldn't take this survey to heart. It is in no way a reflection of your merit or your capabilities. But I will say, we all need to be aware of our prejudices. When surveys like these come out, we must ask ourselves, what can be done to fix this trust deficit? What are workplaces and governments doing about it? There's no denying that women are rising up the ranks. While this new research may be disappointing, it could also be a temporary backlash to progress. So I would say, keep fighting the good fight. And now let's take a look at what else is happening in the world. Time now for Gravitas Global Headlines.
China's top COVID official and multiple cities signal a possible relaxing of the country's strict zero-tolerance approach to the virus after nationwide protests calling for an end to lockdowns and greater political reform. Russia accuses the United States and NATO of playing a direct and dangerous role in the Ukraine war, and that Washington had turned Kyiv into an existential threat for Moscow. Elon Musk says he expects his company Neuralink to begin human clinical trials with brain chips in the next 6 months. The Islamic State announces its leader has been killed in what they called combat with enemies of God. U.S. military said Hashemi was killed by fighters of Free Syrian Army in southern Syria in mid-October. On a state visit to Washington, French President Emmanuel Macron warns that subsidies paid to U.S. companies under a green energy plan are super aggressive and could split the West. Spain beefs up security after a series of letter bombs was discovered in the country, including one that was sent to Spain's Prime Minister last week. Two Palestinians shot dead by Israeli army in a pre-dawn raid in flashpoint town of Jenin in the occupied West Bank that led to clashes and gun battles. New York and Singapore are jointly the world's most expensive cities according to the Worldwide Cost of Living Index. They displaced last year's number one Tel Aviv, which fell to third place. Zach Crawley, Ben Duckett, Ollie Pope and Harry Brook hit hundreds as England racked up 506 for 4 on the opening day of the first test against Pakistan in Rawalpindi. The previous record of most runs on day one of a test was 494, which was set 112 years ago in the match between Australia and South Africa. Two-time world champions Argentina qualified for the knockout stage as Group C winners following their 2-0 win over Poland. The Poles are also through to the round of 16 stage ahead of Mexico thanks to a superior goal difference.
And with that, it's a wrap on the show. Thanks for watching the show with me, Priyanka Sharma, leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. See you.